Good morning. I'm Connie Gustafson, and I'm with the Center for Multicultural Development at the California Institute for Mental Health. I am delighted to be here. How about you? You know, Kurt Franklin, who is a gospel singer, sang a song called "What You Looking For, What You Looking For, Hey, What You Looking For, What You Looking For." I think that after today, we don't have to look no more. Mental health and spirituality have come together in these last 2 days in a tremendous, moving, transformative manner. And I thank all of you for being here and making that happen. We also want to thank Dr. Fallot for the inspirational message that he brought. Religion, spirituality, the search for recovery. He says, we are all them, they are all us, we are all each other, and I thought that was very beautiful. We've now convened a response panel to Dr. Fallot's presentation. We have 5 people up here that are going to respond to certain aspects of Dr. Fallot's presentation from their own perspective. Each one of them will speak, and then at the end of the speaking, we will open it up for questions and response. I'd like to introduce Dr. Priscilla Ridgway. She is an assistant director at the Yale University in the Program for Recovery and Community Health. Priscilla is a social worker and a researcher, a mental health consumer, and a consultant in systems change to Alameda County Behavioral Health Care Services, Wellness and Resilience Hub. She has been trained on the subject of spirituality and recovery all through the state of Kansas, and we welcome her. Priscilla. Yeah, I'm introducing everybody first. I'm going to introduce everybody first.
Oh, you're going to introduce everybody first.
That's okay. Boona cheema comes from many faiths. She was born into a Sikh family, was sent to Catholic school to get a good education, was blessed by the Dalai Lama at the age of 17, and instantly became a Buddhist. She graduated from the Unitarian Universalist Seminary, Star King, and remains grounded in all faiths. Boona is the executive director of BOSS, Building Opportunities for Self-Sufficiency. Boona. Andree Reyes works at Alameda County Behavioral Health Care Services and is the assistant director and wellness educator with the Wellness Recovery Resilience Hub. Andree is a consumer and a member of the pool of consumer champions in Alameda County. She is also a social worker specializing in the community mental health and is a member of the New Thought Faith. Welcome, Andree. Kumar Menon is the Chief of Community and Government Relations in Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. Kumar is also a member of the Mental Health and Spirituality Initiative Executive Work Group. He will be hosting the 8th Annual Mental Health and Spirituality Conference in LA on Thursday and Friday this week, and I'm pleased to introduce Kumar. Reverend Barbara Meyers is a community minister with Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. She is the author of a curriculum called The Caring Congregation, which is used to help communities of faith understand and embrace individuals with psychiatric challenges. She is the producer and host of the Mental Health Matters, a Comcast production used to reduce stigma and discrimination. This Comcast production is sponsored by Alameda County Mental Health Board, a county public awareness committee. Welcome, Dr. Meyers. And Dr. Fallot is up here to join us for the response. Okay, now, Patricia.
I remember when we first started talking about this spirituality
Okay. Third time is the charm. I remember when we first started talking about the Spirituality Initiative, it was some years ago. But this topic has been sort of underground in the recovery movement for decades. And in knowing many of the leaders of the ex-patient movement, which it used to be called, or the consumer survivor movement, that many people have stories of closet mystics that they very rarely talk about. But this has been sort of the secret of this movement, that it has ridden on the wave of the back of those turtles for centuries now. And now it's come out into the open that this is the truth of recovery, that recovery in large part is a spiritual journey. I guess seeing Roger talk about the research base, as a researcher and as a closet mystic, I'm sort of ambivalent. Part of me is like looking at his findings of that study and saying, wow, look at those p-values. And only if you're a researcher would you say, wow, look at those p-values. But the p-values showed this highly significant findings in that study, even with that small group of people, that are quite extraordinary. But part of me is troubled, are we going to have to prove spirituality as an evidence-based practice, which, a lot of the mental health system now is all about EBPs, right? And in my own research on hope and recovery, what I found was that the psychological understanding of hope was not well mirrored in the actual lived experience of hope. And that a lot of the basis of people's hope occurred in a place that was way beyond numbers and measurement, that was way beyond even words, that it couldn't really be said, let alone measured on a standard psychological inventory. And that people talked about their healing happening in a place, for example, where they could achieve what has been called in psychology flow, that kind of flow state, where you get into a creative process where time ceases to exist and you're absorbed in something, that power that's greater than yourself. And that is a place that doesn't fit with clock time, and it doesn't fit with measurement, but it certainly exists in the space of healing, that it's only in that place somehow that we can be healed. And that people talk about those places of peace, like if we look at some of the images that have been placed up here of people making artwork of that place that's of the wind or of the nature, the natural world, where we can go beyond any of our concepts or any of our pain, any of our wounding. Certainly meditation and prayer, and some of these primal energies that people are learning to focus, like in the Reiki practice, So these are places somehow where our vision can shift, and where those of us who have been deeply wounded can heal. And it's a place that, is said to surpass, I can't even say that word, but anyway, it goes beyond understanding. So the fact that we're trying to make meaning somehow comes to us in a place where there is no word for what we're experiencing. And so that immeasurable place is what we touch. Somehow we can touch from all these traditions. Yesterday, those of you who were here could hear all of that dialogue across the traditions and get a sense of that place. And we could get a sense of that place this morning in listening to that drumming and that heartbeat. That is the heartbeat of everything. Or in the breath meditations, that in-breath, that inspiration that is part of everything. But then the part of me that is the researcher goes, look at those p-values. Wow, that's so fantastic, you know. If we could just do 10 of these studies, we could make this into an EBP, and then it would be fundable. And maybe we could even get like Medicaid money for reimbursement for doing spiritual support services. And so why don't we just design those 10 studies and get them into peer-reviewed journals and go ahead with this as fast as we can, and then just prove the point that we all knew all along, that it was spirituality all the way down, you know. I think the only other point that I want to make is that we have a lot of gall to stand in the way of the most powerful tool for healing. And we've done it for a long, long time. You know, we have done this. I was in another meeting about parenting the other day, and people were saying, oh, well, we have hundreds of people in housing. Most of them are parents, but we never think about their parenting. Even though to them it's their most important thing about their healing is to get their children back. But we designed our program without thinking about it. And just part of me gets so angry, like this, you know, that's not spiritually correct, but it's like just this sense of outrage comes up that how can we, as a profession that's ostensibly healing, stand in the way of the strongest forces of hope and healing, but we do it every day. So I guess that's one thing that I would like to say in response. It's like, if we know these things are true and they're proven by research, empirically proven, that when people are asked, how is it that you heal? People say, I heal through faith, spirituality, and religion. That we have to, as practitioners, as mental health professionals, finally become more humble and get out of the way of that energy that is the greatest force for healing, and find ways to facilitate it rather than stand in its way. So thank you very much.
Priscilla is so poetic. Yeah. I don't have such a great understanding of how spirituality and faith affects large groups of people, but I can speak from my personal experience, and so I would like to take the opportunity this morning to talk about my personal experience and story of faith and mental health, and try to weave in some of the things that Dr. Fallot talked about earlier today. I grew up in San Joaquin Valley as a Catholic, but that never really worked for me. I went to a Catholic elementary school, which was very difficult because I was ostracized and left out socially because I was a bit different from everyone there. I had come from San Francisco, and everyone knew each other and grew up together in Fresno, and so I was the outsider. I became a cautious, mistrustful, and very private, pensive person at a young age, and in high school and even before, I grappled with my beliefs in a higher power. I thought there was no scientific proof, and for some time I was an atheist. And then later I thought, well, maybe there was a God, and it just couldn't be proved one way or the other. So I became an agnostic, someone who was not sure but left the opportunity open. The possibility, that is. Then when I was 19 years old, my first experience with my bipolar condition occurred. This experience, in addition to being very frightening, was also very spiritual and made me confront all of my beliefs up until that point. Well, in 4-point restraints for 3 days, I kept looking up at the light, and in it I saw Einstein, Aristotle, Socrates, Martin Luther King, and other great people meshing together with God. It felt like a message to me was being conveyed that someday I too could be a part of this wondrous place, which was God's world. And this experience was life-changing for me. As Dr. Fallot described earlier, mental health crises such as this are world-shattering and world-shaping and bring about big questions. So certainly after this experience, I had lots of those, and because of my personal encounter with God, I wanted to be a part of that world. I wanted to be part of God's place. So I started with my spiritual quest, and I went back to my Catholic roots. And before being released from the hospital, I talked to my dad, and I had asked him to get a Catholic monk to come out to visit me. And Father Beaumont came to visit, and I felt, he gave me communion, and I felt a sense of peace and harmony, knowing that something greater than myself was looking out for me. At that time, my psychiatrist and my psychologist didn't engage me at all around my spiritual life. In fact, if recollection serves me, they considered it a part of my psychopathology. So my experiences weren't validated. I also think that they believed, and I was given the sense that it was a part of my personal life that shouldn't be really discussed in therapy, and it was too private to bring up, as Dr. Fallot brought up, as something that happens. I later, luckily, found a therapist that was open to discussing and working with me around my spiritual quest, and one day I remember feeling so dejected, sad, and my self-esteem was so low that I said to her, I just want to be loved. And she said, Andree, I love you. And she said it from her heart, and we cried together. And that made all the difference. The fact that she was able to love me at that moment in time was a gift in of itself. It was a spiritual and life-affirming gift. She also recommended some life-changing books for me to read that set me on my spiritual path. Books that were not necessarily of one faith or the other, but that helped me to think about myself and the grand scheme out there, and helped me to foster a personal relationship with God. I know that this particular therapist bent the therapeutic boundaries for me, and for that I am here today. Throughout my searching, I was also living with multiple bouts of bipolar, most recently in my last crisis in 2002. I was very comforted by my supporters who said that they would pray for me. Just knowing that I was being held in that healing space by so many was just such a comfort. It served also to provide that very needed social support that Fallot talked about. It wasn't until 1 year ago when my esteemed colleague and friend Sharon Keene brought me to her spiritual center that I found my home at Oakland Center for Spiritual Living, a new thought faith. And if you were here yesterday, Reverend Joan Stedman spoke yesterday, and she's from that faith. There I found unconditional high regard and love. And people reached out to me, accepting me fully as I was. The center provided that great social support also. And there I have incorporated meditation and affirmative prayer that keeps me centered and at peace. I recently completed the Oakland Centers for Spiritual Living Foundations course, which is a 12-week, 36-plus hour educational class on what the center believes and how they practice. It required deep spiritual work. I took a good long look at myself and found that there were some things I needed to address. I had forgotten and refused to look at some trauma experiences in my life and I was carrying a lot of blame, shame, guilt, and anger. I realized also that in my mind and heart, God was so very grand and untouchable, to such a degree that my separateness felt so vastly immense. So separate was I to God that my own personal value was very, very diminished. Well, what I learned from my spiritual practitioner at that church, who prayed with me to realize the truth in me, was that I needed to love myself completely, to recognize the divinity that is alive and indwelling. As God loves me unconditionally, I need to hold myself in that same esteem, and to realize blame, and to release blame, shame, guilt, and anger so that I can be in touch with my higher self. The importance of my faith in my trauma healing also serves to support what the research that Dr. Fallot was talking about earlier. I once had a soul reading by a woman named Trish Reagan, and I asked her, why was I given this condition? And she told me that I was given this condition because I could handle it, so that others could help, so that I can help others, to be a beacon to others. She said that she saw the breath of God heal me when I was at my lowest. I am a work in progress, but I now know that I have what every single one of you has, and that is the divine spark of love that binds us together, each other in our humanity. It is good that now we have the freedom to talk about spirituality with each other in such a forum, and I look forward to the day when it is a fully accepted component of all mental health related services.
I'm going to stand up because I can't see this side of the room. My name is Boona. You already heard a little bit about my spiritual journey. I want to share the other side of the journey, which has been a journey living with trauma. I was born in 1945, August 6th, about 7 hours after Hiroshima was bombed. So the world was traumatized. That trauma came into the room, into my mother, and she gave birth. At my birth, there were two grandmothers arguing with each other as that I was the second daughter, and in India at that time, and even now, boys are kind of, liked a little bit better, that whether we were going to keep me or not. And now I know that if I could have actually heard them, I would have crawled right back into mom and stayed there for a long, long time. But I didn't have that ability. Very soon thereafter, the Indian partition happened, and as you heard from Meiji yesterday, millions of people were killed. And my family was a family that crossed the borders from Pakistan into India. And at age 2, I bore witness to the horrific things that were happening. In that time of new nation building, girls were not safe. And it was rare that girls were not violated in the 50s and the 60s. Having experienced that level of violation, I was then sent to Catholic school. I was like, wait, some purpose here that is driving me from these incidences. And I started to, around the age of 8, 9, 10, started to see these as opportunities for spiritual awakening. I had no other tools. I had nowhere to turn to. I had don't have mental illness in India, or we didn't then. We were just mad or crazy. And so being mad and crazy, I didn't want to go get stuck in the asylum. I was going to find a way out and learn to cope by using the process of going into deep prayer and escaping. Very early, learned it from my grandmother because she too had been very disturbed. In 1968, I was convinced that if I left my country, that I could leave the trauma behind. But where do you think I went? I went to South Vietnam in the middle of a war. If there are other people in this room who also live with trauma, we know that sometimes we're attracted to things that we know how best to cope. And so we end up in places to get a little more of it, hoping eventually that we'll find that bubble that we can sit in, and then trauma can just sit outside of us. I lived with 10 children who were napalm-burned babies, and learned at that time to worship with them. And once that awakening happened in me, that it is possible to come from any faith, to have any mental illness or any illness of any kind, and be able to sit with another person whose language you might not even understand, but you can worship and pray and be in the same place together. I've tried to bring those learnings, and I do want to say for the people who are looking for evidence-based, that I am evidence that a traumatized person can heal, lead, and create. So, thank you. As are all of you. So, evidence we have. Researchers of a different kind we might have a little shortage of, but we'll get to that. I've tried very hard in my work with the homeless, with folks with mental illness, and at BOSS and in the county to keep that spiritual piece alive. A challenge that is that's coming up for us in organizations, especially in nonprofits, is how do you have this faith-based, religious, spiritual conversation with your consumers, participants, clients, whatever we call them, when you're not supposed to be talking about God? And, you know, being traumatized and healed and everything kind of makes you pretty fearless at the same time. So I'm like, open up the doors, let's see what happens. And if people really are concerned and upset about that, then we'll take another step. So all over BOSS, there are workshops that are spirit-based, which is the safest word that we have found, that are welcoming to people in ways that they can speak from wherever their deepest values are around spirituality and faith. And as part of my being here, when I heard about this, I was like, yes, been going to the co-occurring stuff, been going to the change agent stuff, this one really, really must happen. So I come here with that commitment to all of you that I will be part of this work, that I will bring the work that is happening in BOSS to this committee so you can look at it and find ways to make other nonprofits change and open up their doors for this discussion, because it must happen. There is only limited value to a conversation between a counselor and a participant, or a case manager and a consumer, or an executive director and her staff, if we're not asking the questions about what moves you, what keeps you grounded, what keeps you alive, why are you here, who are you? If we don't ask those questions with great love and great care and continue to create workshops, and the one that I was most turned on by was the spirituality and trauma piece, because they really are linked together. So any Saturday, if you want to come, there is a circle of women, all of us who have experienced trauma but also experienced homelessness. We meet at one of our programs in West Berkeley, and different people lead that, and it's an amazing experience. Of course, you might show up on a day that we're doing henna, but that in itself is also part of spirituality. So welcome and thank you very much.
Hello. I thought I would also follow Andree's lead and give you some of my own personal experience and why I, too, am evidence that spirituality can help you heal from a mental illness. After my daughter was born, this is many years ago, I suffered a severe postpartum depression and was hospitalized because I was suicidal. I thought that my whole world had come to an end and that I was going to be one of those kinds of people that I had always disvalued previously in my life. As a scientist by training, and never went to church, hadn't been to church in maybe 20 years or before that, and sometimes even made fun of people who did. Well, this experience was completely upsetting my whole way of thinking of myself, and my whole values were put into question. And I was very lucky and fortunate, just by random placement, to be matched up with a psychiatrist who had a very spiritual center. And this was unusual in those days. This is back in the 70s. And I didn't realize how important this was. And he didn't, talk about spirituality with me. It was more the way he treated me. And I remember I came in one day and talked with him. This is after I'd been discharged from the hospital and been working for a while, and came to talk to him. And he asked me, when I was in the midst of, complaining about something or another, he asked me, did I do anything spiritual for myself? How did I care for myself? And I said, no, nothing. And he said, well, would you like me to teach you how to meditate? And I said, okay. I was willing to try anything. And actually, I'll be honest, my thought was, well, he's just trying to get out of doing some work, so he could just be quiet for a long time and he doesn't have to do any work. So that was my rational thought. But I still went ahead with it, and he gave me a little book afterwards to read and take home, and I did read it. It was about meditation, and I had, shortly after that, a spontaneous spiritual experience, religious experience, in which, this is at my work, which was at IBM, and I was in a conference with one of the vice presidents of IBM, and I was sort of in the back of the room to be technical support to our managers who were presenting something to the vice president. And as one point in the talk, the vice president's secretary came in the room and handed him a telephone message. And as she reached out to hand in the message, I saw a halo over her head like this. And I knew I was the only one that was seeing it. And the thing that first popped into my mind was, God is trying to tell me something. I mean, this is after not going to church for 20 years, and that was the first thought that I had. And it took me a long time to try to understand what it was that God was trying to tell me. But eventually I came to the understanding that God was trying to tell me that there's a piece of the divine within each of us. And this is completely different from any of my thinking before. And that in fact, I had a piece of divine within me, and that I was precious and loved by God. This can even bring me to tears today. It's just such a profound change in my whole way of thinking. And completely, my life just completely turned around. What I valued, what I didn't value. I started going to church, and eventually started a depression support group at church when I was able to be open about my condition with the parishioners there. And in trying to understand how to be more helpful, I took a class in seminary, and after I was about halfway through my class, I thought, this is what I need to be doing with my life. I was had a wonderful career as a scientist, but this is where my life, that this is where God is telling me to go. And so I retired from my job and entered seminary and completely changed my whole career. My whole concept was was that I was going to be a minister focusing on mental health issues, even though I didn't know any ministers like that. But I just knew that's what I was going to do, just sort of followed where I was being led, sort of, and I keep doing that, and whenever I find that I follow where I think I'm being led, I can do anything, anything that needs to be done to get in the way, I can do it. In my introduction, it was mentioned that I produce a television program. It's called Mental Health Matters, and one episode per month, and we focus on a different mental health topic each month. And you might wonder, how is this ministry? And it's ministry because the whole point of the show is to give hope to people. Hope, and I always think of that person that's sitting out watching it who is in the depths of some sort of struggle and confused and doesn't know where to go. And they're going to see a person on the show that's talking about how they had come through a similar experience and how they have come out in a more positive way. And that's why I'm doing it. And, that's why that we're even there doing it. So let's see, I agree with everything, because I'm responding to the keynote speech. I agree with everything you said. and I also am, I think, an example of a piece of evidence in the scheme of things that shows that religion and spirituality can be, it's beyond understanding, beyond numbers, beyond studies, but it turns lives around and can make a difference to everyone. Okay, thank you.
After all those compelling stories, I feel like I'm not going to be, I'll be like the accountant coming into that creative boardroom and saying you can't do it at all. Because where I'm coming from is what the public mental health system can do, cannot do, or is where it is going today in light of all the information and research that's out there. Leaders like Dr. Fallot, Dr. Lukoff, brave practitioners in counties across California are adopting some of these things on their own, are advocating for this. Leaders in consumer movement like Jay in LA County are pushing for this. Compelling stories like this are pushing for our public mental health system to address the role of spirituality, religion, and faith in the recovery process. But it raises a lot of questions for public mental health systems. The questions are policy and practice. I mean, we have created structures within which our folks deliver services. So when you bring in a new idea, obviously the first question is, what is the structure we're going to deliver these services in? And that's a big question. And we have, in LA County, we have confronted this in many ways. We started outreaching to the faith community in 2002. And since then, since the beginning, there's always been the question, when is the public mental health system going to ask the question about the spiritual interests of the consumer and family member? And we've always struggled with it. The number one question that has come to us is about competency. And you can call it understanding, learning, but it's about competency on both sides. We feel in this kind of area, we need a close relationship with the faith community or spiritual community. And on the other hand, our practitioners need to really be comfortable in what they're doing in this area. How are we dealing with boundary issues? What are the practice parameters? What kind of judgment what are the framework for creating judgments about no harm? What role does it play in cultural matching? How do you decide to address, for instance, the 3 questions that Dr. Fallot mentioned we could ask in our assessment? How do we make our practitioners comfortable that beyond the answers to those 3 questions, they're able to progress to the next level? The case has already been made that we shouldn't split mental health and spirituality. As it is, we fragment our services in counties. Definitely shouldn't fragment the whole person. The question of evidence-based practice is, again, not a big issue in the context of what Mental Health Services Act has provided. We talk about community-defined evidence is an area where some of the experiences that were talked about today, we don't need to follow the EBP formula, so to speak. So the 3 things that Dr. Mayberg conveyed through Rachel, I wanted to address. First one, in the context of Dr. Fallot's presentation. First is acknowledge the role in helping recovery. Plenty. Look at the attendance here. We're certainly acknowledging. The second one is work to support. This is the part that I was saying the public mental health system is struggling with. And the third part is collaboration on stigma. Luckily for us in LA County, the stigma part is something we started with already. But again, the part that has always been a sort of question mark for us is working to support the spiritual interests of consumers and family members. A couple of comments about the presentation itself. When Dr. Fallot, one of the points he made under religion is a quagmire, where the practitioner says religion is beyond my expertise, really speaks to the competency aspect I raised earlier. The other part is, as a public mental health system, it's very difficult to address the concept of spirituality central. But it can be approached in this way. The consumer is central. Hence, the whole person is central. Hence, spirituality is important and part of that central being. And the understanding that there are big questions that science or our practitioners cannot answer. The big questions are addressed only in the spiritual realm. And many of our consumers and family members, the big question is what really matters to them, helps them in their recovery process, give them direction in their life. And with that, I want to close my response to Dr. Fallot's presentation with these things. For a public mental system to move forward in supporting spirituality of consumers and family members, we need support. And I believe, again, the attendance here and our experience in LA County has shown that one kind of support exists. That is, the interests of consumers and family members. Advocacy on their part that this should be addressed up and down the state by public mental system. It should be an important aspect of recovery. The second part is that what kind of work needs to be done to create the structure within which our practitioners can do this. And it's not a challenging work. We have begun the process. We have been informed by research and experts. It's a matter of finding the will within systems, sit down, and work out how do we integrate the 3 questions into our assessment. As simple as that.
Thank you, panelists. Is there any response from the audience? Any questions for our panelists? Yes. You'll have to speak loudly because I...
Fallot. I know I have my question here. It's just a matter of, where did I put it? Oh, God, I feel so. I'll find it when it's over. But I can't find it.
Talk to you afterwards.
Okay. Pardon? One more question where I see where we're running out of time. Right here, please.
My clock says we got time. Okay, I'm sorry, you're Kumar?
Yes.
Yeah, you asked 3 questions. Okay, well, I mean, I have an approach that I'm taking in Santa Clara County, and that is to collaborate with the psychiatrists. They meet for a psych practices meeting once a month, and they meet with our primary Valley Health and Hospital every 3 months. And I'm a meeting participant with Office of Consumer Affairs. So I'm on a 5-hour-a-week contract with the department, and have been an advocate with the department for 15 years. So, but my approach is basically a 3-fold approach to bring them something like true hope and spirituality as a resource for recovery, and sit in, just as a quiet participant, for a few months, and then start giving them resources to give them something besides big pharma to approach our friends and family with, and our customers.
Thank you for doing that. We need strong advocates everywhere. Let me tell you, in LA County, the brave few, one clinical psychologist who had a psychosocial program actually started a spiritual support group and actually has published a paper. Some of you may have read her work, Dr. Ina Wong McDonald. So that's one end. The other end is a recently opened wellness program. The clinician in charge came to our group and said, I do guided imagery. I help our clients, consumers, find fulfillment beyond just their mental health. But I don't call it spiritual. So, the work you're doing in trying to bring it falls into the whole realm of activities that we should push for. But for a system as a whole to adopt them, we need to see how we can put them, institutionalize them, so to speak, so that anybody who walks into any clinic or any service with that request, like Andrea, we should be able to help them.
It shouldn't be that hard. I mean, it's not, the brain needs nutrients, and we've been misinformed by NAMI, we've been misinformed by Big Pharma, and the spiritual states that we experience, the voices that we hear, they're not, we obviously know they're not always need to be medicated. Those people have something to offer, the shamanic states, what Dr. Lukoff is working with too. So,
Okay, thank you. It's almost time for lunch. There's one person right there. Is it really quickly? We'll get a microphone to you very quickly.
Okay, I think the simple question is, what can we all in this room do to help advocate these needs to bring it into the system?
Thank you. Anyone want to respond?
I did bring up the
Okay,
system thing,
go
so
ahead.
let me, one thing, if you're from Alameda County, already have done a lot. Look at this conference. This conference would not have been possible without advocacy. Next thing you got to do is you got to get the internal machinery working in fine-tuning, putting things on paper, into forms, training our staff, etc., so this becomes pretty much standard practice.
Okay. Thank you very much. You want to say one?
Fantastic.
All right. With that said, thank you very much to our panelists. You were wonderful.